November 28, 1943, Tehran. The world's three most powerful leaders sat at the same table for the first time: Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. The world wondered how they would defeat Hitler, but these three men were discussing something different: how they would divide Germany. The agreements made that night drew today's European map, and none of it was told to the public. By the fall of 1943, despite the war still raging, Allied leaders had accepted one reality: Hitler would definitely be defeated. But the real question was, what would happen after the Nazis? This question was so important that a special committee was established in Washington, the Post-War Advisory Committee. At the head of this committee was Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau Jr., and his plan for Germany was even more ruthless than Hitler's. The report on Morgenthau's desk bore this title: Plan for the Complete Destruction of Germany's Industrial Power. This plan proposed turning Germany back into an agricultural country. All factories would be dismantled, mines closed, and even universities shut down. But the Morgenthau Plan was just the beginning. The real secret agreements began in the fall of 1943. At a secret meeting in Quebec, Roosevelt and Churchill signed an agreement. According to this agreement, the western part of Germany would be under British and American control, while the eastern part would be left to the Soviets. But the most important detail was this: Berlin would remain completely under Soviet control. Churchill had hesitated when signing this agreement, because leaving Berlin to the Soviets could change the balance of all of Europe. But Roosevelt had insisted, we must get along well with Stalin. Otherwise, a bigger war could break out. This agreement was so secret that the British Parliament was unaware of its existence until 1974. Stalin, who attended the Tehran conference, had very different plans. Documents that emerged from NKVD archives in 1990 show that Stalin planned to control not just Germany, but all of Europe. Stalin's advisor, Vyacheslav Molotov's secret notes contained these lines: "After we partition Germany, we will support communist parties in France and Italy. All of Europe will be ours within 10 years. This plan was so detailed that it even determined which Soviet generals would serve in which German cities: Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt. Separate socialist transformation plans had been prepared for each, but Stalin told none of these plans to either Roosevelt or Churchill. America's Secret Service, the OSS, was not idle either, preparing its own plans. Operation Safe Haven, prepared by OSS Director William Donovan, aimed to seize Nazi gold. This plan wasn't just treasure hunting. The goal was to make Germany's post-war economic power completely dependent on America. OSS agents had infiltrated German factories even before the war ended, beginning to steal technological secrets. The most interesting part was the OSS conducting secret negotiations with Nazi scientists. Werner von Braun, Willy Messerschmitt, Kurt de Boos, these names would be smuggled to America when the war ended, transferring Nazi rocket technology to America. This operation, called Operation Paperclip, was launched in the 1940s. Goal: transfer Germany's technological superiority to America. Churchill found himself in a very difficult position. On one hand, he had to maintain alliance with America. On the other hand, he wanted to prevent the Soviet threat. Most importantly, he had to ensure Britain remained powerful after the war. Churchill's private secretary John Colville's diary contained these lines in early 1944. "The Prime Minister is very worried. America and Russia could agree and sideline Britain. We must be very careful about Germany." As a result of this concern, Churchill developed a secret plan, Operation Unthinkable. This plan proposed attacking the Soviets as soon as the war ended. The plan was so secret that only 3 people knew: Churchill, Chief of Staff Alan Brooke, and the Defense Minister. The plan was never implemented, but it showed Churchill's true intentions. February 4th to 11th, 1945, Yalta. The world witnessed the most important diplomatic meeting in history. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin were deciding Germany's future. But what was told to the world public and what was actually discussed were very different. Newspapers wrote, "Germany will be democratized." In reality, the three leaders were discussing how to exploit Germany. Stalin's proposal was clear. We should take $20 billion in reparations from Germany. Half for us, half for you. Roosevelt found this figure too high. If we completely destroy Germany, Europe's economy will collapse. Churchill had a different concern. If Germany is too weak, the Soviets will control all of Europe. The discussion lasted for hours. Finally, they reached an agreement. Germany would be divided into 4 zones. America, Britain, France, and the Soviets would each control one section. But the real agreement signed at Yalta was in the secret protocols. The existence of these protocols was unknown until 1968. According to the secret protocols, Soviets could establish socialist governments in all Eastern European countries. America could establish whatever military bases it wanted in Western Europe. Britain would retain the right to protect its African colonies. 40% of reparations taken from Germany would go to the Soviets. The most important secret clause was this: if disagreements arose between the 3 countries in the future, Germany could be partitioned again. After Yalta, the Morgenthau Plan was detailed. The plan consisted of these phases. Industrial destruction phase. All factories would be dismantled. Machinery transported to Allied countries. Educational reform. All universities would be closed. Only basic agricultural education would be provided. Population reduction. Half of Germany's population would be forcibly relocated to other countries. Cultural erasure. German would only be a daily conversation language. Scientific and technical texts would be banned. The goal of this plan was clear: to prevent Germany from ever becoming powerful again. But all these plans would remain on paper, because an unexpected resistance emerged from American and British diplomats. George Kennan from the State Department prepared a secret report against the Morgenthau Plan. If we destroy Germany, we will upset Europe's balance. This will favor the Soviets. Anthony Eden from the British Foreign Office also voiced similar concerns. A weak Germany means a strong Russia. As a result of this diplomatic resistance, the Morgenthau Plan was gradually shelved. July 17th to August 2nd, 1945, Potsdam, the final major conference. But this time, Roosevelt wasn't there. Harry Truman had replaced him. Truman had very different ideas. Unlike Roosevelt, he didn't trust the Soviets. At the first meeting, he said these words to Stalin: "Mr. Stalin, America has the atomic bomb. Don't forget that." This threat changed all balances. Stalin now understood that capturing Europe wouldn't be so easy. The agreement signed at Potsdam changed most of the plans from Yalta. Germany would still be divided into 4 zones, but each zone could establish its own economic system. This change would cause West and East Germany to follow different paths in subsequent years. The Marshall Plan, announced in 1947, was introduced to the world as Rebuilding Europe. But the plan's real goals were very different. George Marshall's secret memos, the architect of the Marshall Plan, emerged in the 1970s. These memos contained these lines: "Our goal is not to rebuild Europe, but to prevent Soviet influence. Germany is the keystone of this." As a result of this strategy, America announced it would provide $1.4 billion in aid to West Germany. With this money, Germany's industry would be rebuilt, but it would be completely dependent on America. The Soviets reacted harshly to this plan. Stalin began imposing his own economic system on East Germany. The CIA, established in 1947, began conducting secret operations in Germany. These operations, called Operation Gladio, were designed to prevent communist influence in West Germany. CIA agents held secret meetings with German politicians: Konrad Adenauer, Ludwig Erhard, Willy Brandt. These names would enter politics with CIA support, becoming America-friendly leaders of West Germany. The most secret operation was protecting former Nazi scientists. Under Operation Paperclip, 1,600 Nazi scientists were smuggled to America. These people played critical roles in establishing NASA, developing atomic bombs, and jet engine technology. The Soviets weren't idle either, implementing their own plans. A state called Democratic Germany was established in East Germany, but the democratic aspect of this state was only in name. KGB agents controlled East German politics. Leaders like Walter Ulbricht and Erich Honecker were actually taking orders from Moscow. The Soviets' biggest advantage was controlling industrial facilities in East Germany. These facilities were dismantled and transported to the Soviet Union. Between 1945 and 1948 alone, 4,000 factories were moved. When the Berlin crisis erupted in 1948, it became clear how fragile the secret plans were. The Soviets cut all roads leading to Berlin. The goal was to force Western powers out of the city. America's response was the Berlin airlift. For 11 months, aid was transported to West Berlin by air. This operation is considered the beginning of the Cold War. But what was really important was that this crisis definitively divided Germany's future in two. There was no longer one Germany, but two separate Germanys. The consequences of these secret plans are still visible today. Germany's current status as Europe's most powerful country is not coincidental. This is the result of the Marshall Plan. The establishment of NATO, the formation of the European Union, even today's Russia-West tensions. All are consequences of secret decisions made between 1943 and 1948. The most interesting aspect is that no plan was fully implemented. The Morgenthau Plan failed. Stalin's European dream didn't come true. Churchill's Soviet threat couldn't be prevented. But even these failures shaped history. Today, there are still thousands of undisclosed documents. Secret files remain in CIA, MI6, and Russian archives. When these documents will be released is unknown. Partial CIA documents released in 2019 show that secret plans continued into the 1950s. Even Germany's reunification was pre-planned. Blitzkrieg ended, but the games that began afterward are still continuing. The world order planned by three men in 1943 is still valid today. Churchill's feared Soviet threat continues in different forms. America's hegemony in Europe continues. Germany, despite being a country planned for destruction, is today Europe's leader. But what about today? The Ukraine war, NATO expansion, Europe's energy crisis. Are these really coincidences? Or are they continuations of plans from 80 years ago? And the most important question, what plans are the descendants of those who made these secret plans making today? Does history repeat itself, or did it never stop?